Okay, well, it looks like we're about to start. I'm just testing out my audio first. If you're joining me now, welcome. This is Avi Penhollow of the Proximity Podcast. And today is a big day all around in Washington, D.C. especially. There's a lot going on. So we're going to get into it in just a little bit here. So as I speak, the joint session of the Congress, House of Representatives, and the Senate, they're now making their way into the House chamber. And we will be talking about that today. We're going to be talking about the rally or protest, whatever you want to call it, that's going on in Washington, D.C. And we're going to be talking about so-called prophets that have predicted that Donald Trump was going to win a second term, and the cognitive dissonance that's attached to that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I produced a couple videos recently. I dropped one yesterday. You can go check that one out. Yesterday's video talked a lot about what is about to happen right now. So if you're confused about everything that's going on in this joint session, what's supposed to happen today with the Electoral Count, you can check that video out. That one was mostly about the issues revolving around the Trump prophecies, but it does get into explaining the process of that. So welcome to everybody. I'm just going to take a minute or two to get set up, make sure everybody can get in who wants to get in. If you want to join me live and discuss these things, I'd be happy to send you the Zoom link as well. And so we'll get started in just a second here. So I see Mike Pence and Speaker Nancy Pelosi have now opening the session. Should be pretty interesting. Now, we're not going to do it live blow by blow. The only reason I have this on right now is primarily to, hold on, let me take this volume off the stream here. We're not going to do, a play by play. Hold on one second. Yeah. So we're not going to do a play-by-play. I'm just going to keep my eye on it. And if anything really good happens, I'll let you know. You know, this is being broadcast everywhere. The Electoral College vote count. We're here just to kind of talk about it and make some sense about it and have a discussion. There's a lot to talk about today, not only regarding the electoral count, but the big Trump event. There was a big brouhaha yesterday in Pennsylvania, trying to, basically overturn the results of the election. Today is really the last day that they have to make this happen. So with that said, I'm going to take these off because I think we're good. And we're going to get started. Mike Pence is now speaking to the chamber. And he is, again, so I mentioned this yesterday, his only job at this point is to open the electoral votes, the envelopes, hand them to a teller, and then the teller will speak give the results, and then after that, he will ask if there are any objections. Now, we expect that today there are going to be some objections, and starting with Arizona. So this session could end pretty quickly, and that's why I'm doing this broadcast now concurrently with what's going on, because I have a feeling that they're going to suspend this joint session pretty quickly. And when they do, the House members will stay in the House and the Senate will go back to their chamber, and they will debate the objection. Now, they have up to 2 hours to do this per objection. But since Arizona is one of the states that goes first, I'm expecting that they are going to have to adjourn or suspend the session pretty quickly pretty quickly, like maybe within the next few minutes. So when that happens, I'm not sure if any of the news coverage will show the debates that are going on. They're not going to be much debates. Each speaker has up to 5 minutes. The real point here is it's all symbolic. There's no way that any objection is going to make it outside of the House, which is Democrat controlled. The only chance it would have to see any light of day would be in the Senate. And again, it takes both the House and the Senate to do anything about an objection. So this is really just theater and the last attempt to protest the results of the election officially. So regardless, I think the most it can take is up to 100 hours. For example, if every single state today has some objection, and to do that objection, by the way, and if you've seen my previous videos, you know this, in order to do to make an objection, you have to have both a legislator from the House of Representatives, and they have to be joined by a senator, and they need to put it in writing, whatever their objection is. So there are several who've come forward, and I've talked about this yesterday too, including Josh Hawley, a senator from Missouri, has vowed to sponsor one of these objections today. So the point is this: they could delay it potentially up to 100 hours, for the 50 states. That's not going to happen because I don't believe there are going to be objections for more than, I say, about 7 to 10 states at the most, I think. But we'll see what happens. I mean, we're here just in case there are any big surprises. Also, we're here to see if there's any developments on the ground with the protests that are going on in D.C. My sense is that this is the last hurrah. And of course, if you've been watching my other videos, you'll know that my big thing is looking into those who claim to be prophets, who declared that God told them that Donald Trump was going to win a second term. Some of this has been popularized mostly through, there was a guy, he was a fireman. This is back before the 2016 election. His name is Mark Taylor. He became pretty famous in the charismatic prophetic world because he put a prophecy out that Donald Trump would become president. And back then that was kind of laughable for a lot of people. And there's much more to this story. And if you go to Rotten Tomatoes and look up the Trump prophecy, there's a really wonderful review there that it's much more scathing than I would do on my show, but I really enjoyed watching it. The point here is that this same person, Mark Taylor, among many other evangelical voices, and when I say evangelical, I mean white evangelical mostly, and those from the charismatic movements, predicting. And even today, I was checking my feed today, and there are people just completely in denial of what is happening. And this is the cognitive dissonance that I was talking about. That happens a lot in such movements. And so it's a lot to deal with. I'm just taking a look at the screen here. And Mike Pence is doing his opening remark, I think. Let me just make sure. Also, I want to check in and see if anybody is. So I'm also, so what I'm looking at, running everything by myself. So I'm looking at the YouTube channel right now. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. But I'm also on the live chat. And so if you have any questions that you want to ask me live in the chat, you can go ahead and do so. I'm going to say hello. And I will, from time to time, take a look at that chat. And I'm also streaming. I'm not streaming this on Facebook, but I posted the link to this YouTube stream on Facebook. So please share that. I'll be on here for as long as it takes. I think we got our first objection going on, and he's looking pretty dramatic. I actually don't know who that is speaking right now. But yeah. Yes. So Senator Ted Cruz just stood up, and he is objecting to the votes from Arizona, which we expected. And this is what I was talking about. Arizona, they're doing this alphabetically. So I expected that this whole thing is going to be suspended now for about 2 hours while they go debate the objection from Arizona. And we know the result is nothing is going to happen because the House is just going to flat out reject it. So this is just procedural. Mike Pence is up there now and saying basically, I believe now they will suspend the session and they will, and then they'll have to debate it and come back. But that's where we're at currently. It'll be very interesting to see what happens here. In other news, while we wait to see if they're actually going to suspend this session right now, obviously last night's Georgia race was a pretty big deal, and I was not expecting this. I expected maybe one of the Democratic candidates would have won. It appears that both of them won, which really changes the game politically here in the United States. It really changes the game because now what it means is that the Democrats control basically the executive and the legislative branch. It gives Joe Biden an incredible amount of political capital right now. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And yes, so that's exactly what I expected to happen. They just adjourned the joint session where they're going to go now and debate the objections. So the senators are all getting up to leave, and they're going to go to their chamber and debate it. Like I said, if there's any chance at all, it would take all of the Republican senators to vote for the objection for it to stand in the Senate. But it's very unlikely that's going to happen even in the Republican-controlled Senate, because we've already had Mitch McConnell coming out against it, and a few other senators coming out against it. So this is just all drama and theater. They're filing out now. It's pageantry. It's kind of silly, but I'm just waiting to see if anything really significant develops today, so that we can talk about it. The other thing too is the House. Well, like I said earlier, the House itself is not going to entertain this very, very long. They're just going through the motions. The real question is, how much time are Republicans going to take up today for this staged event? Now, let me just say something for the benefit of those who, because I know I have several people who have disagreed with me on this, and they think that because I'm actually not a Democrat, first of all. I've voted Democrat many times, but I've also voted occasionally for a Republican, but this is, so I'm pretty independent when it comes to that. I am quite to the left as far as political spectrum is concerned. But let me just say that if you are a person who truly believes that there was election fraud and that sort of thing, I mean, I can respect the concerns for that. And it's not just conservatives that have expressed concern over voter fraud in the past. We've had, even in recent years, we've had Democrats during this same session that's going on right now have done the same thing. They've raised objections and they were thrown out. In fact, in 2016, the same thing happened and it was thrown out. Joe Biden was the vice president at the time, and he is the one that had to say, "Look, the election's over," and so the count went forward just as it will today, but it's just going to take a little bit longer. So this is kind of the big day, and as I talked about yesterday, the way that really what's going on is posturing for future elections. And so there's a lot of ways the pundits are going to talk about this, and I'm not really a political pundit. This show is more about talking about ideas, how we communicate with each other, and then, of course, I have other areas that I dive into, some theological ones, some spiritual ones, and so there's my interest in this whole drama is primarily because I am concerned about civic discourse. I'm concerned about how history is understood in the United States, or I rather should say not understood. And I'm very interested in issues of education and power. So that's why I'm here. But one of the things that is going on right now is political posturing. So we'll take the case of Senator Josh Hawley from my new home state of Missouri. He was one of the first senators to come forward and say, "I'm going to object to the electoral count results." I don't even believe, and I just figured this out today, I don't even think he's objecting to the results of his own home state, our state of Missouri. He's objecting to other states' election results. So that's interesting in and of itself. That a senator from one state wants to delve into the matters of other states, but that's his prerogative. He's a young senator that I'm pretty sure has presidential aspirations, and he could be the one. I mean, Trump. It's doubtful that Trump will come back to run in 2024. But as I've said in previous broadcasts, Trump is not going away, and Trumpism is here, at least for the foreseeable future. 74 million people is not something to take lightly, and so as irrational as I think a lot of Trump supporters are, and some of them extremely so, that's 74 million people that are going to be extremely unhappy today. I've already seen some really, there's a part of me that's kind of gleeful about it because of so much of the hateful rhetoric that I see coming from that camp. But I see some genuinely distraught people today that, and then I have to ask myself, do I blame them for following these false prophets and these messengers of doom and gloom and all that kind of stuff? And this is just political propaganda, and of course, let's be honest, it takes place, from all of the political parties. There's political propaganda. So essentially, I'm a little bit divided because I do feel, I know some of these people personally. I do feel for them. I think they're completely not listening to reason when it comes to whether 7 million votes difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. That's a very significant number. It's nothing to scoff at. So essentially, you're saying that 7 million votes were somehow fraudulent. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. It's just, if there were a case, it would have been brought forward by now. And then I know I can hear all my Trump supporting friends saying, well, you're just not listening to it. But I am looking at it, and I haven't seen anything really significant that isn't in every single election that happens. I mean, the questions of voter fraud are not new. They go back, and I would say this to somebody who is concerned about voter fraud, because we should be concerned about legitimate voter fraud. But let's look at it this way. What other kinds of so we're talking about voting, and voter fraud is certainly something that should be dealt with severely. It is the essential, structure of a democratic republic. And so you need to keep the integrity of elections. That's true. But there are many, many other issues of integrity when it comes to elections. And the same people who are talking about voter fraud are not saying a thing about big money in politics, dark money in politics. These same people will not come out against things like Citizens United, and they'll talk about George Soros all day long. But they completely ignore the fact that the same thing on a much larger scale, like money in politics, like corporate money in politics, is clearly an issue of in the integrity of an election. But it seems that the people who are right now talking about voter fraud, they're not interested in other ways that elections are rigged, if you want to talk about them being rigged. I mean, the system very much is controlled by politicians who are controlled by large amounts of money. I mean, let's put it this way. There are some hopeful things right now going on with some people getting elected who are found ways to raise money, for example, to compete with these corporate politicians. One example, again, is here in Missouri. With the recent election of Cori Bush to the U.S. Congress, was very significant because here was, a working class mother who took on pretty much the establishment of her own party, in this case, the Democratic Party, and won, and that she's not alone. So it can happen. And so one of the things I think that's important from a strategic point of view, and again, this could be a conservative or a liberal, this is just how things work, is yes, it is true that it is formidable, very formidable, when we talk about the systemic repression of, proper representation of the people of the United States. And that's because of a lot of the, lobbyists, super PACs, things like that, things that, legitimately people like Bernie Sanders will raise objections to. And so working class people, traditionally in the past would understand that sort of thing and would side with someone like Bernie Sanders, even if they disagreed with him on certain other political issues. They would say, representing the common people means you should not be allowing big money to basically be poured into elections. Now it's very kind of funny for me to listen to those of the, rich and wealthy class complaining about money in politics because social media and other activist groups are able to match them now in smaller donations coming from lots of people. That's a genuine threat, because at the end of the day, we're talking about agency, like what really can be done. And it's so easy, and I'm one of them, so easy to be a cynic when it comes to, politics. Easy to be cynic. I never thought growing up that I would ever see anyone who represents my political views ever even see the light of day, in US politics, So the closest thing I've seen is a Bernie Sanders. And I don't even want to get into issues of, whether he's a social democrat or democratic socialist, that all those kind of things. That's the other thing. Americans do not even understand their usage of political terminology. You talk about liberal, you talk about conservative, you talk about socialist, talk about social democrat. Nobody really knows what they're talking about unless they're political scientists and or actually understand or have read some Marx, read some social theory. So it's hard to take a lot of the stuff that I see in the media seriously, because nobody really, they either know what they're talking about and are lying, or they're just spreading things that they've heard. And of course, social media is probably the best example of that. People just repeat the same thing. I mean, even this morning, if you on my feed, and the comments that I've made, I get called a communist, socialist, libtard, at least 50 times a day. Even though I know that if I were to sit down and talk to most of these people, it would take about 2 minutes to conclude that the person doesn't even know the vocabulary that they're using. And that's unfortunate. And that is a symptom of, our education in our society. I mean, that's really how I feel about that. Tell me how you really feel, So if you've joined us live, I'm going to take a quick peek and put my old glasses on, old man glasses, see if anybody has dropped any comments in. And I am happy to answer any questions that you might have. I'm just sort of waiting for developments. I noticed that they're showing the Trump, protests going on right now. And I looked at it earlier. You had Eric Trump up there, and man, these people are really, you want to know what their purpose is really. I mean, you want to know, why are these people agitating, instead of consoling people right now? I mean, the normal process after an election loss is, to console, regroup, lick your wounds, get ready for the next round. These guys have basically, what's going on today is a signaling that the same kind of rhetoric, irrational rhetoric, and the same kind of, Trumpism is not going away. And in the sense that they are signaling through this event that they're going to continue this mode. And so it will be largely up to the Republican Party now to see if they're going to think it's efficacious to continue with that sort of thing, or try to regroup and move on from Trumpism. And so we're looking at a pretty big divide in the Republican Party right now, between what they would call moderates, or what the far right would call rhinos, and those who, like Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri, who are putting their hat in the ring for picking up where Trump left off. And so there's clearly a market for that. And any Democrat or person on the left that thinks that this quote unquote, victory of Biden, I don't really consider it a victory when you have 74 million people voting, not even just against your candidate, because it's not about that. To vote for Donald Trump is more than just voting against another party, because you can even be a member of the Republican Party and not want to support that. And so that's not going anywhere. And it's very foolish for people to think that, the momentum is in the. However, at the same time, Republicans need to take stock. I'm talking a lot of politics today, but it's sort of a political day. Republicans need to take stock in the fact that they just lost they just had Georgia flip to blue, which I never thought I would see, in my lifetime. And that's enormous. And I live in a red state now of Missouri while I do, finish my doctoral work. And, I was looking at the numbers on election night, and at the beginning of the night, we had a governor's race. Nobody really thought that the Republican wasn't going to win, Governor Mike Parson, but early in the night, the Democrat, of course, because the larger precincts are are coming in from St. Louis, Kansas City, Columbia, the Democratic candidate was ahead. So, I mean, and the end results, when you look at the numbers themselves, it's really not an enormous difference. We're a red state in Missouri, but if you look at the numbers, it's not that significant, you guys. There are, if Cori Bush can pull it off against her establishment party in that large metropolitan area in a very traditionally, held seat, it can happen anywhere. And so I've been joking around on, my on my previous videos, about doing a Senate run against Josh Hawley in 2024. But I think this goes back to what we're talking about earlier with agency, for example. I think it can happen. I think that some things have been shaken up, and in a sense, now Republicans have kind of gotten themselves in a little bit of trouble, because in the past they could take somebody like they could look at somebody like a Cori Bush or an AOC and that sort of thing, people with very little experience and that sort of thing. They could look at them and say, well, you have no experience, in legislating, or even, you haven't led a company or something, because usually private enterprise they get a pass because they have executive, experience and that sort of thing. You've just proven that you can take somebody like a Donald Trump, throw them into the highest office of the land. And certainly there's a lot of insanity going on, but, we're still here. We made it. Thank God we made it through 2020, and we're moving forward. But the argument that a citizen who is not from either, a large business owning private sector, or, has a political career, can hold office, I think that issue is kind of off the table. You can make that argument, but I think we've got teachers running for office, and I think more and more teachers need to run for office, because here are people who care passionately about what they do, who are paid dismally, not even living wage in some places. I just came from Hawaii, where I taught for 4 years, and beautiful place, beautiful people. There's so much I will talk about that on future episodes, because I don't even believe Hawaii should be a state, in the sense that it was stolen like pretty much everything else. And I think what is being done there in Hawaii is criminal. What I saw, even in the education system, I find it to be extremely racist and criminal. But the point is teachers have run in local office races there and won. I'm thinking of a representative in the state legislature of Hawaii, Amy Peruso, a teacher who is just magnificent. I'm a huge fan of hers. On the Republican side, you have Andrea Tupola, who was a gubernatorial candidate not too long ago, and has recently won herself. She was a state representative in Hawaii. So my point is that we live in a pluralistic society, and in a democratic republic. If you are to really represent the people, you need working class people as representatives. I mean, I don't feel, let's put it this way, a lot of working class people, 74 million people voted for Trump. A lot of them are working class people. And they're looking at someone like a Donald Trump to represent their interests. But Donald Trump, or any other, people from the top echelon of society who haven't worked a job. I mean, let's face it, Donald Trump has never worked a real job in his life. So how is it then that someone like a Donald Trump could represent the common interest of the working class? It's just, it's ridiculous. Now, you can be empathetic, and this is not about hating the rich and that sort of thing. It's just about common sense, in the sense, I'm using common sense, not in the Gramscian way, but in the way that if I can empathize with you, and I can empathize with someone who's a billionaire and suffering from cancer, but having empathy towards someone and not ever really being able to understand the life that they live in the working class, when the cost of living goes up but your wages do not, like teachers, for example, I'm sorry, but you can do your best to listen to them, but you will never understand what they're going through. And the same can be said for those in, sorry, my stream ended on the Congress one. The same can be said in issues of race. There's a lot of people of, my skin pigmentation who actually think that they can speak to issues of Black Lives Matter in a negative sense, talking about the lived experiences of real people. But unless you can actually have that experience, you really don't understand. And so what does that mean then politically and representation wise? We talk about taxation without representation and all this kind of stuff. The working class are all taxed. And the working class are multicultural, and they're not being represented by, wealthy people being elected to office. So, I'm not sad when I see senators and representatives go down who are solely there for the interest of, the wealthy. So there's that. But as far as representation is concerned, there is agency. I continue to be a cynic about U.S. politics and stuff like that, but I am not. I don't believe that there is no agency. These are issues of power, and we're going to be talking about a lot of that kind of stuff in future videos that I'm going to do. We're going to talk about structure versus agency. And so what do we mean by that? Structures in critical theory has to do with the things that are systemic and generally systemically positioned against those who lack power, in political power, social capital, all of these sort of things. And such people exist, whether you want to acknowledge that or not. The system of power naturally marginalizes those who are not identified in the culture of power. So we need to understand that as a society. And if you truly want representation, I'm sorry, but the old American master narrative isn't going to work for many, many people. And this is really what's behind, people who are fearful of a pluralistic society. They're fearful of moving away from Western European cultural values being prioritized, because they have assumed that these values take precedent over anyone else who's come. They need to assimilate to their cultural values. Now, when you want to talk about individual rights and things like that, which of course, some of these ideas do come out of the Western Enlightenment, but that does not make them the exclusive property of the Western Enlightenment. It's not as if egalitarianism or individual rights cannot be discovered innately in other cultures and other paradigms. I mean, it's ridiculous to state that only Western culture, and I'm talking here to the Plod boys and people like that who are like, we created modern technology and all that kind of stuff. Anyone who's that simple-minded, who does not understand the accidents of history and how things develop, it's hard to even have a rational discussion. And so this is really what's going on now. We're talking about today's events. We have a lot of people really up in arms, thinking that the whole world is crumbling around them because their master narrative no longer holds up to the people and is not representative of the people. And so you can try to kick the can down the road and move the goalposts, saying that this is going to continue to work, but the numbers are against you if you really think that you're going to go back to some golden age that never existed. The golden age never existed because that golden age, those that refer to a golden age, and I've always asked people who say, make America great again, tell me the time period. Explain to me when that period was. And let's go to that period. And you will find that what was golden age for some was a pure living hell for many others. So if America really wants to live up to the ideals that it talks about, it has to be truly representative. And this is just something that causes many people to be fearful. And you don't have to necessarily be an old white male for this to be fearful. You can be a person of color who has bought into the system of this golden age and bought into the message of the American master narrative, and be fearful. It's completely understandable. There are several people that I know who don't fit the profile of the white, male, and they're fearful too, and they are buying into, a lot of these fear messages too. And again, this wasn't invented by Donald Trump. Donald Trump is just a salesman, just a person who garnishes and is good at garnishing the fears that people have. And the arrogance that some people have. So there's that. We have Chuck Schumer on the floor, I'm assuming, of the House right now. And he's basically saying that Congress doesn't determine the outcome of the election, people do. There's his message. And so this is part of the whole debate that's going on right now in the House. And the same thing is going on concurrently in the Senate right now, because we've reached that point in today's process in which there was an objection right out the gate when they opened this joint session today. Arizona was first on the list. There was an objection. Of course, good old Ted Cruz was right up front to be the senator sponsoring that objection. And so immediately what has to happen is they have to suspend the session, and each branch goes the Senate goes to the Senate and House stays there to debate it. They have up to 2 hours to do this. I'm sure they're going to try to take up the whole 2 hours. Then they'll come back and go to the next state on the list. So today's process will take as long as it does to go through the objections. The longest it could go in, according to the rules, would be 100 hours. Like if there were all 50 states had an objection that was going to be heard, and I don't think they will, it could take 100 hours, which means today's process could be delayed until tomorrow, maybe even later into the week. I don't know exactly how that works, but it may not finish today unless there's only like 5 or 6, so that potentially they could go into the late night and wrap things up. But that part I'm not so sure about. All right, so I'm just going to take a quick look here at our chat and some of the numbers. All right. So well, one of the things I'm interested too, so I'm going to go local here for a minute, is, like I said, I've moved to Missouri from Hawaii back in July to work on my doctoral studies, and I'm just figuring out, who the local media outlets are and that kind of thing. And I've noticed that today there's not a lot of people talking about Senator Josh Hawley. There's not a lot of the media outlets here in Missouri. And I find that to be a little bit interesting, that this is a big story nationwide, in the sense that he was one of the senators leading this charge of all the nonsense that I've just been talking about today with the objections. And our local media has been kind of mysteriously silent. I'm looking through their feed right now. I see some things about, COVID, which of course is very serious. Some weather moving in, from some snow, but some stories about trash pickup in Columbia, but nothing really about Josh Hawley. and what he's been up to. And in another story, I'm sure they're talking about this on right-wing talk radio, is, Senator Hawley has reported that some left-wing extremists, as he characterized them, came to his house and to disrupt and to, I don't know exactly what happened, but this conflicted with the police report. The police report denied that this happened. But you would expect that the local news coverage in Missouri would be covering it, but they're strangely silent on it today. I don't know. Maybe I'll check the news later tonight. But so Chuck Schumer's still going at it, probably just lecturing. And of course, this is grandstanding on both sides. I'm sure Chuck Schumer is gloating right now. I can't hear what he's saying. I'm just looking. I'm sure he's gloating right now that he is now not the House minority leader. He is, in effect, of Georgia's elections last night, has become the House majority leader. So there you go. All right. So I'm just taking a look at where we're at now. I haven't seen any developments. I just want to do a quick check. Any developments on any incidents that might be happening out in Washington D.C. with the whole, Trump protest going on right now. I doubt anything significant has been happening. They've had some speakers there today. I saw Eric Trump, doing his thing. He's starting to find his speaking groove and talking points and stuff. I mean, I don't know, man. I think about these guys, and I think about what they do, and like, what are you trying to accomplish, really? I mean, I think it has to do, of course, with money and power, but it has to be incredibly boring to keep repeating this stuff to people, like are not very well educated or not very, and it's not even about education. So when I say that, I need to make this disclaimer. When I talk about being uneducated, I don't mean having a college degree or even a higher degree and that kind of thing. That's not what I mean by uneducated. I mean, I have, friends who have no college degree. I come from a working class background. I'm talking about just like basic discernment skills to be able to see through, propaganda. And all of us, now there's not one exception, nobody listening to this or watching this, none of you are exempt from propaganda. And if you think you are, it's untenable in the society in which we were born into propaganda. We could almost say that propaganda is, very much part of is in our blood. And so an ideology is part of our blood. So the only way to be able to extract yourself from that is to realize that we're all susceptible to it, and to do some internal work, thinking about in which ways are my thoughts and perceptions being shaped by forces that are not necessarily about, my individual sovereignty and that kind of thing. And once you're aware of that and you understand how, propaganda works, you're not going to sit and listen to someone who makes such countless aimless claims like a Donald Trump or whatever. Now, and we'll get into this in another video, because I want to talk about a very famous, not famous to us, but someone who is well known in Europe at the time, Jacques Ellul, who was a French theologian, lawyer, professor, and he wrote extensively on propaganda. One of the greatest books on propaganda, I think, still, even though it's written several decades ago, was his book, The Technological Society. And also he wrote a book simply called Propaganda. Amazing how relevant that book is still to this day. But one of the other things he's talked about is, propaganda works in different ways. There's not just one kind of propaganda. And so I'm going to be talking about that in another video because I think that would be a really good place to start when it comes to discussions. Now we're coming up on our first hour here. And as I expected, and that's why I started this broadcast at noon, as I expected, we're right in the middle of a suspended joint session of the legislature while they hear the first objection for the state of Arizona. And that one has 2 hours to conclude. Then they'll come back and they'll move to the next one. When they come back, it will be known, my prediction. I'm not a prophet. I'm just trying to use my powers of rational thought. When they come back in an hour or so, or however long they have, it's going to be thrown out. The objection from Arizona is going to be tossed out, and they will move to the next state. You do the math or the alphabet, come up with the next state. We got Arizona. Who comes next? So apparently Alaska didn't raise an objection, or I missed it. Let's see. Yeah. And so then they'll just move on down the road, doing the same process over and over again. I don't know if, when I think about running for Senate and that kind of thing, that was one thing I'm not sure I could, I would want to deal with, but I guess it's par for the course. All right, you guys, please make sure that you like this channel. I'm going 55 likes strong as of this morning. And, I just started doing this, so we'll keep it going. And I have a lot I want to bring to you. So subscribing is going to help me as soon as I can get, my numbers up there. It's really going to help the time I have to produce more content and that sort of thing. And I don't normally just talk about politics. I've got a lot of things I'd like to share with you. And some people have expressed interest in, I got some comments regarding the idea of what I think the prophetic is or isn't. So I promise I will make a video on that. I'll give you a little teaser for that. Obviously, I don't accept what I consider these fake charlatan prophets for profit, like Mark Taylor, Kenneth Copeland, those that, even Trump brings around, like Paula White. Now, these guys are all just frauds in my view. And I don't speak of that as an outsider. I was part of these movements for many, many years. I know some of these people, and, they're just doing business. And like I always say, most of them couldn't even hold a job that you have, so you have people going to these churches and the people leading them couldn't even hold down a job because they lack the discipline. They're used to being, they're very Trumpish in a way. I mean, they're used to giving orders and having people like lap at their feet and do whatever they want them to do, or they attack them. And I could go on and on about my experiences with that in ministry. So I don't need anybody coming at me saying that I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to these movements, because I come from all of that. Okay. So you'll have a hard time with that, and yeah. So we'll be talking about those kind of things too. You can learn more about some of my work at avipenhollow.com. So, but please, when you watch these videos, make sure you like them every little bit, even if you can't, help financially. I mean, there's a lot of people going through a lot of stuff. The likes help, and the subscriptions help, sharing the videos help. And I do have a Patreon page, and you can find that on my website, avipenhollow.com, or off of the Facebook page too. And then the podcast is called The Proximity Portal. My co-host is Jason McNair, and we have a couple episodes I'm about to put up online, and we're going to be recording a few more this week. So if there's anything you would like me to address or talk about, or any content you'd like to do, let me know. And I'm also going to be doing some courses that I'm going to keep closed to the public, so you'll have to sign up for them, because these are more courses on theology, not theology formally, but on certain theological topics. For example, we could do one on the prophetic. And I forgot to give you the teaser. One of the people I do actually agree with when it comes to the prophetic is a theologian. His name is Walter Brueggemann, and he's a professor of Old Testament, and extremely knowledgeable. And I love his book. It's called The Prophetic Imagination. And so in one of my earlier episodes of the Proximity podcast, I actually talked about a little bit about his work, and we're going to do a full-on study of it. If you want to join me for that, I'll be putting some announcements out for that. And then the other show on the spiritual religious side is going to be about Jesus himself. And that might sound pretty mundane or boring or whatever. But the way that I'm planning to go about talking about Jesus is through my life experience of being a minister, an ordained clergy person, one who has studied religious studies, not just Christianity, but world religions, one who studied theology and biblical studies, and also one who has looked at these things from a skeptical point of view. So we and a multicultural point of view. And so there's some great texts that I'm going to bring into that course. And so again, I'll be posting what these courses as they become available. That one's going to be coming up pretty soon. And if you're interested, just drop me a line and I'll get you the connection to do all that. So all of this you can find www.avipenhollow.com. Please make sure you like and subscribe this video. And what we're going to do is I'm going to take a pause at this point and check in with some things. And if anything major develops today, I will pop back on. And but it's right exactly where I said it was going to be last night. And so following a pretty predictable pattern at this point. And so I'm going to go do some work and pop back on later. So, all right, have a great day.